But the gospel from John 20 is what I really find fascinating because it shows Mary emerging from her dark night and experiencing the initial vision of the glorified Lord. It shows her movement into the unitive way. Now, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Now, first of all, notice that she arrives at the tomb while it's still dark, a symbol of the fact that she's still in this transition stage of the dark night. Now, that said, it's the waning darkness right before dawn, and when she sees that the stone has been rolled away, she runs to get Peter and John. They return to the tomb and see that it's empty, and then leave. But Mary stayed, weeping, and then the light begins to dawn. And by light, I mean both natural and supernatural. First, says the gospel, she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Then Mary turns around and sees Christ. But notice that she doesn't recognize him. Saying this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom do you seek?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Well, Mary doesn't recognize the risen Christ. Why? Well, again, this seems to be the tail end of Mary Magdalene's dark night. Remember, in the dark night of the soul, our spiritual vision is darkened because it's so overwhelmed by the glory of God, who is impressing himself more deeply upon us. It's dark because we're blinded by his glory. And even though the Lord isn't manifesting all his divinity, as Mary Magdalene is emerging from her dark night, she still doesn't recognize the Lord until he reveals himself to her. Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. So finally the Lord shows himself. And from the text, it looks like Mary probably falls at his feet, clutching him. And this is totally understandable. She's just come through the worst thing she's ever experienced. But the darkness has suddenly lifted, and she sees the resurrected God-man who saved her from a life of terrible sin. She's overwhelmed. And yet, instead of saying, there, everything's going to be okay now, Jesus says, "Do not hold me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father." In other words, something more has to happen. He needs to return to the Father. Why? Because that will release the Holy Spirit and initiate a new and necessary outpouring of grace upon the world. You see, that's what had to happen. The redemptive love which Christ manifested on the cross had to be poured back out on the world. The fire of love in men's hearts had been dulled by sin, and a new outpouring was necessary. Jesus said, "Do not hold me," because even greater than Jesus' presence in our midst is the Trinity's presence in our souls. And that only happens through the Holy Spirit.